Alright everybody, welcome back. So what we're going to do in this video now is we are going to remove this UV map here, okay? So in the last video we had our UV map, which was default from Blender, okay? And we put our texture on it and we got that all set up. So what we want to do now is we want to learn a bit more about UV unwrapping itself, okay? And we want to learn about unwrapping UVs and marking seams. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this UV map here, okay? So if I come over here to this bar, as you see, I have my UV object data properties here, okay? And if I go to the UV map here and the object data properties and I click the minus sign, it will get rid of the UV map. Now that it's got rid of the UV map, what it's done as well is it's actually deleted the UV grid that we had, because there's no data to put the texture on to the cube. So there's no data in our UV preview to put the texture onto the cube, because our cube is not it's not basically unwrapped. If we go to our shading tab, our our UV is still there, but it is not being displayed because there's no UV map for it to actually be displayed. So what we'll do is we'll have a look at the cube and see what we can do to get the UV map back. So if I press A and I select the whole cube, okay, and if I press U, okay, if I press U on my keyboard, now I have the unwrap menu, and I have unwrap, smart UV project, light map, follow active quads, cube projection, and a whole load of other stuff. We'll just worry about cube projection and smart UV project and unwrap for the moment. But if I click unwrap, as you can see now, it has unwrapped it, and what it's done is it's put every face on top of each other. Now I can see that by highlighting the UV sync selection, clicking on a face, and then if I press G I can grab it. And as you can see now, this is going to be horrible when we go to properly texture it with a different texture, okay? Because every face is all on top of each other, and it's all it's very bad. Every face is on top of each other. Now while this might look okay here, you still see that you have a bit of a problem over here with it, and the texture won't wrap properly. So smart UV project is not going to work. Our UV unwrapping is not going to work for the moment, because we haven't given it any seams. We haven't told it, okay, this is where I want you to unwrap, and this is where I want you to put the texture. So if I press A, select everything again, and if I press U, and if I go smart UV project, and then I press OK, as you can see now, what it's done is it's actually tried to unwrap it as best as it thinks it wants me to unwrap it. But as you can see, we still have the problem here. We still have the the seams here, which are breaking and cutting in, and that's not going to work at all whatsoever. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually go and I'm going to actually have a look at cube projection. So again, I'm going to select it all, I'm going to press U and then go cube projection, and it's done exactly what UV has done as well. It's actually went and put the faces on top of each other. Now if you remember, when we first went into Blender, we had it unwrapped nice and perfect, and now it's actually all messed up. So we're kind of saying to ourselves, okay, so how do we get that back? Well, how we get that back is by marking our seams, because that's what we need to do. We need to mark our seams, and we need to tell Blender where to cut our model. So I'm going to go, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to edge select mode, okay? So edge select mode, and I'm going to look at this. They're going to say, okay, so what way do I want to what way do I want to unwrap this cube, okay? So first of all, I'm going to delete the default UV map, as we done a few seconds ago. Just going to click that minus sign in the object data properties, and click the minus sign. And so when we think of this cube and we think of it laying down flat, we think of cutting it in a way that it would actually lay over flat. So for instance, if we were to cut along these seams, if we were to cut along these two seams here, that would make the top fold out flat. and then these two back seams would make the back fall down flat, and the two bottom seams would allow this all to fall down flat, so it would allow this face, and this face all to lay down flat together on the ground, and then this face would lay forward, and then this face and this face would both lay to the side. I know it sounds very technical at the moment, but you'll see exactly what I mean when I mark the seam. So I'm going to go into edge select mode, okay, and I'm going to select this edge here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold shift select, and I'm going to select these other two edges, okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into wireframe just to give you guys an idea, okay. So I'm going to select the top edge, the back, and the bottom edge, and then I'm going to go Control E, and I'm going to mark seam, okay. So Control E, mark seam, and what it's done now is it's actually highlighted it in red. So this is saying, okay, so this is the seam where Blender's going to cut. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the exact same on the opposite side. So I'm going to select this edge, shift and select both of these edges, okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go Control E, and I'm going to mark my seam, and as you can see now, two of those edges are marked, and it's sort of like a C, if you look at it, you know. So the two top edges, the two back edges, and the two bottom edges are marked. So if I press A now on my keyboard to select it all, and I press U and I press Unwrap, as you can see now, it's after unwrapping, but it's after giving me a bit of an error over on this edge here, because these are not cut off. We don't want these to be cut off though. So in order to define how we want this to fall down flat, we want to make a cut on the bottom as well, okay. So we have our cuts on the side, and we make one cut on the bottom. So if I select down here at the bottom edge, Control E, and I mark a seam, and now if I select it all and I press U and Unwrap, now we have our texture back again. So essentially what it's doing is it's saying, okay, so if I cut the two sides, if I cut the top, the back, and the bottom, and then the bottom down the back as well, then what's going to happen is I'm going to be able to go and, you know, basically make it so that this UV map unwraps properly. And it's actually unwrapped properly, and now it's back again. So I can press Z and I can go back to solid view. Now if I select all of this here, and again if I go to Z and material preview, as you can see now my texture is back, because now it's unwrapped, and now I know, because this texture is here, I know that it's unwrapped perfectly, and I know that it's working for what I want. Now I can press G, of course, and I can move this UV map around, and I can kind of bring it a bit, you know, better towards the grid, depending on what I want. So if I wanted it in there, I could press G, and then I could move it, and if I hold shift on my keyboard, I get a better movement, you know. So I can actually go and you know, move it into the middle, press G, grab, and then shift and bring it over to the middle, make it a bit better to where I want it, you know. But generally you want it in this whole grid area, you know. And as you can see now, I'm getting a bit of errors here because I actually moved the UV map. But if I just press G, and then if I just go and kind of, you know, move it, you know, and fill those in, and, you know, I can kind of get it where it's actually matched up perfect. What you want to do basically is you want to make sure that the actual UV map itself is matched up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually leave it by default of where it was, you know, just save me moving it around. But yeah, you can move it around and put it better in the square if you want yourself, you know. So we have our UV map, and we have our cube, and we have our texture on our cube, okay. So that's perfect, that's all well and good, and that's absolutely perfect, that's what we want. So now what we need to do is we need to get our texture into you know, onto the model itself, okay. So if I wanted to put a texture onto this, I could actually go and just click open, And if I go to my desktop here, okay, and I go down to the texture here, and I open it, as you can see, the texture doesn't really fit perfectly, you know. The texture is not fitting perfectly on the actual model itself. So if I click the drop down menu here and use the Minecraft texture here, and from my shading tab put the Minecraft texture on it, you can see that the texture is not really, you know, it's not really fitting perfectly because it's not properly set up to fit the UV map perfectly. So this is where we're going to use like a 3D program, 3D editing program, and you can use GIMP or Krita. I'm going to use Photoshop in this case, and then I'm going to match the texture into the UV map and give you an idea of what what it is and how it sits on it. So if I go and I want to save this UV map, okay, if I go to image or UV, and I go export UV layout, okay, so UV export UV layout, and I'm going to save it on my desktop, and I'm going to save it as, I think I saved something here before, didn't I? Yeah. I'm going to save it on my desktop as cube.png, okay? So that's UV export UV layout, okay? And I'm going to open up my Photoshop here. Now, you guys can do this in Krita or GIMP or whatever. But first of all, what you want to do is you want to open up your, your UV map, which is cube. No, that's not working. Let me see. Why didn't that export out? UV export UV layout and cube, and for some reason it seems to be exporting with its alpha out, and I have no idea why it is exporting with its alpha out. It should actually export with the UV layout itself, so maybe Blender is being bugged somehow. So I select all of my UV map and UV and export UV layout and cube again. There we go. So yeah, it turns out that I was having a problem with it, but as you can see now, there is my UV layout here, okay? So this is the UV that we just seen in Blender itself, okay? And if you look in Blender, okay, when we went to put on the texture itself, right, what happened was the texture wasn't fitting properly within these UV squares. So what we have to do is we have to tell the UV map, okay, this is what we want you to display on the cube itself. And how we do that is we use programs like GIMP, Photoshop, and stuff like that to actually manipulate the texture. So I have my my cube PNG here, and if I go and I open my Minecraft texture, which is down here, as you can see now, I have my Minecraft texture here and I have my UV map over here, and all I simply want to do is just lay my texture onto my UV map, okay? In Photoshop, I'm just holding left click and I'm dragging it across. So as you can see right now at the moment, we have a problem with the texture not sitting properly on the UV map. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and we are going to I want to make this layer transparent a bit in Photoshop, so I just give it a bit of opacity and bring it down a bit. So now, as you can see, we can see the texture on top of it. Now I can just simply move my UV map over, and as you can see right now at the moment, if I move my UV map over, my UV map is actually smaller than the texture itself. So what I want to do is I want to actually edit the texture to fit the UV map. So I can just scale my texture down, and again you could do this in Krita or in Photoshop or GIMP. I'm just going to use Photoshop, the transform tool and the scale tool, and then I'm just going to bring it down. And essentially what I want to do, okay, is I want to match this texture to the black lines of the UV map, okay. So I want to basically make sure that it's falling within the black lines of the UV map. So I want to make sure that it is you know, perfectly set and is perfectly scaled down, and just so it fits the lines itself, you know. um so we might have a bit of a little scale here, so we might scale that up to like that. So as you can see now, our texture is now fitting inside of our UV map, okay. And now that our texture is fitting inside of our UV map, this should wrap seamlessly. So I'll put the opacity back up on the texture itself, and then I will delete the, you know, I will hide the UV map. What I like to do as well is I like to throw a background on it. So I create a new layer in Photoshop. I'll create a new layer, and I will fill that layer by going edit, fill, and I will fill it as black. And now as you can see, we have our texture, and we have a perfectly fit to our UV map, and we have our black texture. So now we can just export this file, and then I'm going to save it as cube color 2, okay. And I'm going to save it as a PNG. Cube color 2, save it as a PNG file. Okay, so now that we have been in Photoshop and we've edited the texture to fit inside the UV map, when we go back into Blender and we load the texture that we've just done, it should sit seamlessly on top of our cube. So back into Blender we go, and what we do is we clear this up here, okay. So we're going to clear this selection up here, so we have our UV back again. And essentially what we're going to do is we are going to go open, and we are going to open up our color map. And as you can see, we have our color map open there, and we go to our shading tab, and if we apply the texture on our shading tab, then we simply just from our UV editing, we simply just go and grab our UV map and just a UV texture and just fit that into place. And as you can see now, our texture is there, our UV map is laid out over it, because as you can see now, our UV grid is laid out over it. And as you can see now, if you look in this preview, we have our cube with our Minecraft texture on it, and it looks like a Minecraft cube. So as you can see now, that UV map is now is laying out the texture. So it's saying put this texture here, this texture here, and etc, etc. And you can see that by if you actually edit some of this, you can actually see where you know, you're editing the texture out. That's the bottom face there. You can see if you selected this one here, as you can see, you're editing it out and stuff. But basically what you're doing is you're saying, okay, so this is the UV map, this is the texture inside the UV map, and the texture is wrapping around of the cube, and now it's fit seamlessly onto the cube, and we don't see any noticeable seams. And we've unwrapped a cube and applied the texture, and that will end it for this video, guys. If you have any questions, make sure to drop into the comments, and I will get them questions answered for you. But yeah, guys, have some fun, play around with some UV editing, and yeah, see what you think. We'll go more into UV editing in some other videos. So yeah, if you like the videos, guys, make sure to give a like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.